It's a pretty rare occurrence. A president hasn't visited the Fed building in many, many years. I think the last time that we're aware of is in 2006 when George Bush went over. And the reason is because the president and his allies have been raising a lot of criticism over this very costly renovation project that the Fed is undertaking. This is something that's been going on for a few years. And the costs have grown quite a bit. Inflation is a factor. Some changes to the initial design and higher cost estimates than they originally expected are factors. But the president and other administration officials have basically been saying this is way too extravagant. They want more information. So the Fed has been trying to share a lot more details. They've shared video on their website. They've put out an FAQ answering some basic questions. And in fact, this morning, one of our reporters was able to go over with some other members of the media for a tour of the site. And we just moved a story on that with some details about, some of the elements of the project that Chair Jerome Powell has said have changed. Some of the things Republicans are mad about, he said they're not even in the plans anymore. And a lot of this is essentially the message was some of this is really overblown. Well,
let's go there now. What did our Bloomberg News reporting team find? Paint the picture for us. Give us some color.
Sure. Well, they were escorted by Fed staff that pointed out some of the reasons why this project is so expensive. So the Eccles building, which is one of the main buildings that's being renovated along with another one, it's very old. It was built in the 1930s. It's never undergone a major renovation. And so one of the things that's so costly is security, bringing it up to security code standards that the Department of Homeland Security set. So essentially blast proofing the building and some other measures. Those are quite expensive. But they also pointed to a couple of elements that were in an original planning document that have seemed to rile up Republicans in particular, like a plan for a rooftop terrace garden. They said that rooftop seating has been eliminated. Some Republicans also pointed out that there's a plan for a VIP elevator. They said the elevator is actually just meant to accommodate disabled users of the elevator, and they showed them that. So in some sense, there was not a ton to see in the way of extravagant features. I think fountains were part of the original design. Those have been eliminated, the reporters were told. But it was very much a visit to an active construction site. There are hundreds of workers that come in and out of this area every single day.
Hey, so help me understand. So I'm assuming the U.S. taxpayer is paying for this, right? It's taxpayer funds that go to this. I mean, who approved all of this spending? And anybody who's done a renovation or construction knows you start with one thing and it kind of goes further. But I mean, how long has this been going on? When was it really approved? Like, what do we know in terms of kind of some of the back details?
Well, the question of the financing is a little bit tricky because, as most Americans might not know, the Fed, as an independent agency, is not funded through the appropriations process through Congress, and that's by design. It was meant to be to insulate them somewhat from political influence. So they collect fees from member banks, members of the Federal Reserve System, and then they also have this huge portfolio of assets. We write a lot in our wonky Fed coverage about the Fed balance sheet, which is something markets care about a lot. That they actually earn interest on the securities that they hold, and that is income, and they use that income to pay for their operating expenses. And so, money that they have left over beyond their operating expenses, if they have it, they send it to the Treasury. So taxpayers benefit in a sense from that when the Fed is earning a lot of money on its balance sheet. But the Fed has been recording operating losses, and that's slightly complicated reasons, but has a lot to do with higher interest rates. So that I think is also what has frustrated Republicans. We've heard Elon Musk talk about this, is that the Fed is spending a lot of money on this big project at a time where they're also recording operating losses. So, the project was approved back in 2017, 2018. It's been some years. And of course, since then, we've had inflation. That has also added to some of the costs here as well.
Yeah, we had a lot since then.
Help me understand to what extent the Federal Reserve Chair has control over this renovation. I mean, is he... And has he, over the last few years, single-handedly been the one to make decisions about what goes where, what gets included, what doesn't get included, what construction materials? To me, that seems like the picture that the president is painting.
For sure. I mean, the chair, no doubt sets the direction and the tone, but this was definitely a project that was approved by the entire Board of Governors, the 7-member board. Of course, the folks who are on the board now are not all exactly the same as the people who originally approved the project. And when Jay Powell was a governor before he became the chairman in 2018, he was one of the governors that helps to oversee things like, the buildings and the facilities. And the Fed has a control over its own buildings. So, in essence, to the earlier question, I mean, they didn't need to seek approval from anybody per se, but the project has continued on, and we don't know exactly, okay, which decisions did Jay Powell make or approve, yes or no, but the broader decision of undertaking this huge project was one that was made by the whole board.
Hey, Kate, at the same time, cost overruns connected to government spending and projects, not a new thing in general, and I understand how you laid out kind of the Fed separate in terms of it being an independent body. Many would agree, though, anything to do with the government where there's cost overruns, at least should be looked at. And a lot of times it can be explained away. Are there nonpartisan observers who are watching this? What do they say?
For sure. I mean, yes, I think that it's it's probably viewed as a positive step that that Jay Powell has asked the Fed's IG, Inspector General, to just do a review of this. We've also seen the Fed in recent weeks post a lot more information on its own website. It seems like they were caught a bit off guard by all the attention that this has gotten and are trying to be more transparent and share more about it. There's clearly a lot of interest in this, and some of the explanations that have been provided for why there are cost overruns seem to make sense. But then in other ways, there are perhaps things that they will have to explain to lawmakers and justify a little bit more than they're used to.